So I suppose there's two aspects, Kieran. There's what will happen out of these hearings, and leaders for until then, including Scott Morrison, can say, we'll wait to see what plays out. But also the short-term impacts. We heard there from Andrew Clennell. We'll see who replaces Gladys Berejiklian, but she was the most forward-leaning of all the leaders, probably in keeping with Scott Morrison in terms of charting a path out of COVID. Mocked not so long ago for not locking down earlier. And then I guess we'll never know how much of a difference that would have made given Victoria right now, even though they might have compliance issues. So that the short term will be significant. And a lot of people in New South Wales, I guess, will be scratching their heads at a leadership change at this point.
Yeah, but as Andrew said, Tom, what's the point of having an ICAC if it doesn't do its job? And I heard Kimberly Kitching earlier on this program say, who guards the guardian? That's what this comes down to. It's about accountability. And I know that the Prime Minister and others might be praising Gladys Berejiklian. Many will find this hard to cop because she's still, as Andrew said there before, she's got a majority approval rating. But when ICAC has reached the conclusion that it's going to pursue an inquiry into Gladys Berejiklian, then I think she's doing the right thing. She is the Premier. She's got to stand aside at the very least, and she's decided as Premier through a pandemic, she's got to go. And I've got to say, Andrew, during that period, you copped a bit of flack yourself for going hard against the Premier, but I think there's a bit of vindication on what happens today. I don't want to make it about us, but the fact is you took it up to her day in, day out off the back of that ICAC. Today, she's gone, and as I said before, the third Liberal Premier to go, essentially, in the face of allegations out of the Independent Commission against Corruption. It's a huge story for New South Wales, but it also has big implications federally. Gladys Berejiklian, for all of her criticisms and faults, there are many saying she did not crack down soon enough on this Delta outbreak. She's being seen as the standard bearer for reopening, for having some hope beyond this pandemic. You could hear that with what Prime Minister Morrison said there. This is a shift in the National Cabinet. It's a shift in the national debate, regardless of who that next leader is, quite simply because they're only going to be new to the job. However, you would think that Dominic Perrottet, if he does secure the job, would be still pursuing this reopening with vigour. He's been arguing that behind the scenes. But as we've said, there are other candidates as well. Rob Stokes potentially, and Stuart Ayres also a chance to take the top job.
Yeah, and I'll go to you this one, Andrew. That's what's interesting. I know some of these reports were sort of denied. You can assess to what extent, how vigorously they were, but these were the reports that maybe, a lockdown wasn't still a great idea, and perhaps Dominic Perrottet was pushing back against this idea. So to that thought, it's not like he's going to be, having a meeker approach if he does become Premier compared to Gladys Berejiklian on forging a path out. I mean, that path's basically set, right?
Yeah, well, let's see what happens. I mean, Dominic Perrottet's got 6 children. He's got a big decision to make for his future. He is anti-lockdown. There was more than Gladys Berejiklian that made the decisions, but she was very much the public face. Kerry Chant has been a giant in terms of the New South Wales way out of this. And she'll obviously remain in her post, you'd expect. I had heard some speculation Gladys Berejiklian might go. I heard rumours at the time John Barilaro could follow her, that Brad Hazzard could follow her. Normally in state politics in New South Wales, when there's one by-election, members take an opportunity to make it 3 or 4. So let's see what happens in relation to that. I would also say in relation to Gladys Berejiklian, there was suspicion she was going to retire anyway. I think she could have stood aside pending the inquiry. She's right to say she doesn't know how long it would go for. But there's every chance that after she got her entitlements after 5 years in the job in January, that she was weighing up retirement anyway. There's certainly been rumours to that effect. She's the longest-serving Premier since Bob Carr, who did 10 years. Neville Rand did 10 years. She's done almost 5 years, just shy of 5 years. So that's a consideration. But yes, I expect some people to criticise the ICAC. I think we should look at the public hearings and the evidence. Obviously, a little bit of heat will be taken out of that now. But I've always held the view that knowing how important to the administration of state government the ICAC Act is in reporting any suspicion of corrupt conduct, that's the test. That Gladys Berejiklian did not meet that test in 2018 when Daryl Maguire had to resign over a corruption allegation, as simple as that. She should have been down to the ICAC with a lawyer that day, and she wasn't. And I think that's what's killed the premiership in the end, Kieran and Tom.
So on that, Andrew, I think if we recall that time, what it became about for Gladys Berejiklian, rightly or wrongly, was surviving the cycle, pushing back, giving that sort of, relatively strong pushback. I think it was a couple of days ago where she said, I'm not going everywhere, and the pressure subsides. But this shows that it's not just about her being able to do that, it's getting down to the truth of the matter via ICAC, and that whilst recently in press conferences, Andrew, a Premier is always able to control news conferences to some degree, right? They still have that power of here's next question, and she was cutting off people that were trying to ask questions about ICAC and saying, putting priority on the pandemic and using that, I suppose, and this shows that you can only do that for so long.
Well, there's no doubt her stocks rose immensely once she became effectively the pandemic premier, and the one coming out making all the announcements about the numbers and the restrictions. We've seen that happen with every premier, and she happened upon a crossroads cluster which, thanks to the good contact tracing of New South Wales Health, didn't take off as Victoria had, and really built her legend, and I will use that term legend, out of that. Her immense amount of popularity, everyone knowing her, being known by the one name, being more popular than the Prime Minister here. It was all about handling of the pandemic. I recall one person who'd seen my questioning saying to me, I don't care if she's corrupt. She probably is, they all are, as long as she's doing a good job in terms of the pandemic. So that will be the challenge for her successor. But there are a lot of people there with the experience through all this, including through the bureaucracy, who should be able to carry that through. I have no doubt about it.